A transformative day in college athletics yesterday. The 5 autonomy conferences, what many refer to as the power conferences, a group that, of course, includes the Big Ten, agreed to a settlement in the so-called House case. It's actually 3 consolidated cases. The settlement reportedly includes $2.8 billion in back damages to former athletes. Going forward, it will provide direct payments from schools to athletes, a revenue-sharing model with a capped allotment. You see the statement here concluding with the sentence, quote, "We look forward to working with our various student-athlete leadership groups to write the next chapter of college sports." Ross Dellinger from Yahoo Sports has done an amazing job covering all of this. He's become one of the go-to guys, and we're really thrilled to have him on to kind of sort it out. Ross, I want to look back first. I feel like that's the easiest part to talk about. So let's kind of understand that. So there is a back settlement. How much money are we talking about, and how far back does it go, and how's it going to be allocated?
Come on, Dave. None of this is easy. Let's be clear. But I'll try to make it as
easiest.
simple as possible. Yeah. But you're right. The certainly discussing kind of the back concept here is a little more simple than the forward. So yeah, there are basically 2 parts to the settlement, right? The first part is the back concept, and basically before NIL was implemented, before athletes could earn compensation from their name, image, and likeness, which happened in 2021, the 4 years prior, basically 2016, 17, 18, 19, parts of 2020, I believe, those athletes that participated in D1 during those years will get spread out among them $2.8 billion in damages from the NCAA national office, as well as from the schools. The schools are taking a reduction in NCAA distribution, which comes from the NCAA men's basketball tournament. So $2.8 billion will be spread over 10 years to those athletes. How many athletes? We're not exactly sure. Plaintiffs' attorneys tell me anywhere from 15,000 to 25,000 athletes are in that group, but there's subsets of that group that will get more than other groups. Obviously, Power 5 football and Power 5 men's basketball players will get what is an estimated 90% of that, 85 to 90% of that money. And it'll be, like I said, it'll be spread out over 10 years. So that's kind of the back portion of this situation.
Okay, so now let's look forward. And I mean, unless you're one of the athletes who's getting one of those payments, in which case you're very interested in it, I would say the majority of fans are probably most interested in what this looks like going forward. My understanding is it'll be implemented for the 2025 school year, so not this year, but next year. And the simplest way to understand this, I think, is revenue sharing, right? We're talking about television revenue, we're talking about ticket revenue, sponsorship revenue. How will this money be allocated? Help us understand like what the percentage that schools can pay out to these athletes and how it's going to be disseminated.
Yeah, let's start with the formula here that attorneys and conference commissioners and those people in that room that created this settlement came up with. It's basically they're trying to get one figure, and they got it by taking an average of certain Power 5 conference revenue streams. So those streams are media rights, so TV money, sponsorships, and ticket sales. So they took those streams from all the 70 basically Power Conference schools, and they got an average. That average, according to some documents that I got, is around 100 million. But that average is going to change, right? Because athletic department revenues continue to increase and go up. But you just take that figure, around 100 million, in the number they came up with to share with athletes from that figure is 22%. And I can get to why later it's 22%. But 22% of 100 million is pretty easy, right, David? About 21, 22 million.
Even I can do that.
So every year, every school will get basically a salary cap of around 21, 22 million to start. But that number, first of all, we don't know exactly what that number is to start next year, the 2025 academic year. We don't know exactly where it will start, and we don't know exactly how much it will escalate, because it will escalate as athletic department averages rise, as that figure rises it was also increase. And so basically, to put it simply, around the low 20 millions each school will have to distribute among athletes. They don't have to, right? This is a permissive thing. They're not required to distribute any revenue share. It's a ceiling, not a floor.
So is that it for student athletes? I mean, what about NIL? We've seen these collectives, and they have had a major impact, as anyone who is watching a show like this clearly understands by now. This has been where student athletes have gotten their money here in recent years, is through NIL. What happens to NIL? What happens to the collective? Is that additive on top of this, or does the NIL money go away?
Yeah, I mean, part of the reason they agreed to this settlement, I think, is to try to calm the recruiting landscape, which obviously the last 3 years during NIL has developed into somewhat chaotic, with booster-led collectives getting together, pooling money, right, and distribute it among athletes. It's very much like unregulated, no contracts, really, no binding contracts at least. And so they're trying to cool all that down a little bit, calm the waters, and bring some stability. And while this settlement doesn't specifically eliminate collectives, booster-led collectives, it does incentivize schools to bring collectives in-house. It also incentivizes athletes not to do deals with boosters outside of the school, not to take money from a collective or boosters outside of a school. And there are a variety of ways it incentivizes that. But, that gets pretty granular, but it's not addressed in a settlement specifically, but it does do some incentives. Now, the second part of this is enforcement, right? The NCAA and college leaders believe that this settlement provides it with a little more teeth, right, to enforce its rules, and specifically enforce its rules on two things: no pay for play, and no payments from boosters that aren't true NIL. And that's an incentive. Again, I mentioned those incentives earlier. That's one of the incentives that's built into the settlement is NIL earned by athletes outside of the school needs to be true and real NIL. And they need to show that it is true in real NIL. Either the school, the athlete, or in some cases, the booster needs to show that. If not, right, there's a sense that that the courts, given the court order and the settlement, will protect the NCAA and allow it to enforce these rules. Now, I've heard of that before. Right? We've heard that the NCAA is going to start enforcing rules on booster collectives and NIL and booster payments for years now. And while here and there we've had some cases, we haven't had a whole lot. So we'll see. It's more of a believe it when you see it type of situation.
Ross, there's so much more to unpack here, and I don't think we're going to be able to get to it all. But last question for you. Got about a minute left. I want to ask you about Title IX. How is Title IX impacted here? Is this money, does it have to be distributed equally between men and women within an athletic department? Is there just a feeling that the scholarships have to be equal? Do we have a sense of what the Title IX implications of this agreement are?
No, it depends on who you talk to, Dave. Title IX lawyers will tell you that the revenue share, say it's 20 million, say a school hits the cap and it's 20 million, the revenue share, 10 million of that will have to go to women athletes at a school. And of course, the issue with that administrators might have, right, is most of the money generated by an athletic department is generated by the football and men's basketball players, right? And that money, around estimated 80 to 90% of an athletic department's revenue, is generated from those two groups. And that money is pumped back into universities, right, to fund Olympic sports that often lose money. So now you're taking that money and then you're going to spread evenly. There's going to be some issues, and it's probably going to be a situation that's going to be settled in court at some point, Dave.
Ross, this is fascinating stuff. We really appreciate you giving us at least a 30,000-foot view of this. I know you have been deeply enmeshed in it for quite some time. Thanks for taking the time out.
Thanks.